Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Richards. This week we're in rather reflective mood as Estuary TV celebrates its first birthday. 1 year on, helping me to work out whether we're maturing towards toddlerhood or throwing our toys out of the pram, I'm joined by Emma Lingard, news editor of Estuary TV and a familiar face to regular viewers. She tends to ramble. And Steve Ryder, who's in charge of the Community Press Office in North East Lincolnshire and is a director of Estuary TV. Thank you very much, both of you, for coming on.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Emma, how's it going so far, 1 year in?
1 year in, well, what a journey is all I can say. from having to, you know, sort of like be in there day to day, doing the news. Yeah, it's been a tremendous journey, I have to say.
Exactly 1 year ago, I seem to remember we were all ever so slightly edgy. What memories do we have of that first night?
I think being a director and not being involved, sort of hand-holding on the first night, it was really a very pleasant experience. I got to look after some lovely guests and drink some nice champagne, and I thoroughly enjoyed the evening. I know that behind the scenes there was some furious paddling going on.
There was,
but,
yes. Under
yeah,
the water, you couldn't see it.
Absolutely, but I think that the first night was a success. I think the publicity that we got for the launch, being the first of the local TV stations to air, gave us a real head start, gave us a lot of publicity that I think some of the other channels haven't got, and obviously very grateful for the staff for pulling it all together on the night.
Oh, why do we need local television? We all thought it was a very wonderful concept when we started, but what is it local television does that any other media can't do?
I think the difference between local TV and local television on other stations is that the interest is very much vested in the community itself. It's very easy for a BBC or an ITV station to report locally, but there's a massive difference between that and people who are invested in their own communities, producing their own programming. I mean, television's become enormous. You know, in our lifetime, we've gone from 2 channels to 3 to 4 to 5, and now to sort of a whole raft. And I think that in all of that, I think things that go on in communities like Grimsby, Cleethorpes, Immingham, I think somehow got lost, and too often there's a stabbing here, there was a burglary there, but that's not really what community's about, so I think that's where local TV sits.
Well, that's a very news emphasis, which is your bailiwick, Emma. What's it like covering a patch with an enormous, great big estuary cutting it in half?
It's been very difficult, I have to say. I'm not going to say, yeah, it's been an easy ride, because in the very beginning, when we first started a year ago, there was only myself and James Dunn doing a news bulletin every day, putting together a 15-minute programme in the evening. So don't forget, not only were we presenting, we were also going out and getting the content to fill.
And of course it's difficult to cover both halves.
It is. I mean, we stretch from Skegness up to Driffield.
Emma, thank you very much. Local television started with some rather earnest as well as entertaining ambitions, as this film shows.
The idea of a launch or relaunch, depending where you sit, for local television only came 2 or 3 years ago, thanks, I think we all know in large part, to Jeremy Hunt. And today I'm delighted to say that it has actually happened. The local TV network goes live at 5:40 this afternoon with the local news in Grimsby. So we've been building in Birmingham a centralised infrastructure that can provide the support that these stations will need for the whole of the next 12 years.
I'm director of one of the channels, Notts TV in Nottingham, which is launching next April, but I've also been closely involved for many years in a long-running debate about local TV in the UK. So it's really exciting that after all the discussions and all the debates, local TV is finally happening today in the UK.
So as I hope that made clear, the purpose of everything we've built is to try and ensure that local TV has a flying start. But the real stars of this, of course, will be the channels themselves. Today we see Estuary TV go live in Grimsby, and next year many more will join them.
At one end of the spectrum, there are well-established and large companies like STV, launching channels in Edinburgh and Glasgow, Archant launching Mustard TV in Norwich, and the Evening Standard launching London Live here in London. At the other end of the spectrum, there are smaller, community, in some cases volunteer-based channels in places like Sheffield. And in the middle, a range of commercial companies such as Bay TV in Liverpool, Your TV in Manchester, May TV in places like Leeds and Newcastle, and This Is TV in Southampton and Oxford.
The task of creating a network centre and a terrestrial transmission network to support all of this has kept several teams of people working full-time for most of this year.
So that was the sort of support we had when we started. How is Estuary TV financed? Where do we get our money, Steve?
Well, the initial tranche of money's come through the BBC. That money lasts for 3 years, but the money decreases during that period of time.
And what do they get in return for that? It's your department.
Content. As part of that initial agreement, in the first year, we provide local BBC with 85 stories a month. And in return for that, we get money. Now, there's no guarantee that the stories that we provide get used by them. That's, at the end of their discretion. And then next year it drops down, and then by the third year it's dropped even smaller. So the numbers decrease to equate to the amount of money they give us. But I have to say, with the content we have provided, we have seen stories being aired on Look North, or being broadcast on Radio Humberside or Lincolnshire. So they are using the content, and we do get feedback from them.
And what is the feedback? Do they like our work?
It's been positive. I mean, don't forget, as I said, in the early days it was myself and James. 85 stories a month. I don't think we quite hit that target sometimes, because that was a tall order for two people.
It's a lot.
But then obviously we've grown. I think there's about 6 people now in the newsroom producing content. So I certainly know over the summer we exceeded 85 a month. So they were getting sometimes 90 or more stories. And the feedback has been good. Yeah, we've got some green people in the newsroom. This is their first broadcasting job. We've had feedback, the same feedback that we give them in improving content. But overall, they've been very pleased. And I know certainly we got some very positive feedback about the armistice footage that we shot at the beginning of the month.
But it's a commercial station. We're getting money in from the BBC, a public or a tax-funded body. Most commercial stations make their money out of advertising. Why are we not making money out of advertising?
Well, that's the big question. And I think that any organisation, whether it's a television station or anything else, which is funding at the beginning, has an absolute need to be sustainable by the end of that period of funding. So advertising revenue is going to be absolutely key. It's paramount that over the course of the next 2 years, we're 1 year in, that we increase that revenue, that we start to see real advertising revenue coming in and more advertising on the television itself. So that's going to be, as far as the board's concerned and the staff at the channel concerned, that's going to be a driving force now.
But we have all sorts of public service advertising. We're all going to be bled dry if we give blood as often as we're told to by Estuary TV, and we all know to look left when we're crossing the road. Why are we not getting John Lewis and their strange penguin ads? Why are we not getting the big car companies? Why are we not getting the Marks and Spencers and the other big supermarkets?
At the moment, we've got a local sales team that are getting local ads in. We have signed a contract with a national ad agency, and those adverts will, in the next couple of weeks, you will start to see national adverts appearing on Estuary TV.
So there's no policy decision, no decision made in the Estuary TV that we're not going to have big national commercial advertising?
No, not at all. Quite the opposite. I think what you've got to remember is that despite the fact that before Estuary TV there was in existence a community television station here, this is still a very new product. The public and companies and organisations, the kind of people you're talking, they've got to buy into what we're doing. That's going to take time. We're now starting to prove, you just asked about feedback from the BBC, the feedback's positive. People are watching the footage that we're shooting, they're watching the television station itself, and that is how we're going to sell advertising. So we've got to establish ourselves first, Hugh. Once we've established ourselves, people start to believe in us, they're going to start spending money. Television isn't cheap, advertising isn't cheap.
One of the things we have to do to gain more advertising, of course, our job as a commercial television station is to shepherd an audience to the advertisers. Our product is audience, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
we're not going to grow an audience if we show lots and lots of repeats, and we have tended to be a bit repetitive.
Yeah, and this is something I always get comments, even, you know, if I'm out and about filming or through our social media or emails, I've seen repeats. We know that. We've got, 18 hours of TV that, you know, initially we were signed up to do, which personally I think is a lot. Maybe we should have gone in at the lower end initially to start with. But the programmes that we're showing, I think we at least have, obviously, Your Hot Topics new every week. There's that Friday show new every week. The news goes to 24 minutes soon, and that's new every day for 5 days. You've got On the Bench Extra, On the Bench. There are, 5 programmes already that are new every week that the audience gets. The extra programmes are the things that independents either, you know, give us or we buy in, or programmes that I've currently been tasked to look into is new programme development. So I'm currently working with people out there in finding money to make those programmes. And they're a mix of historical, because history is a big thing people want to see more of.
Quite rightly popular,
culture.
yes. Yeah.
I think the other thing you need to bear in mind is when are people watching the station and how long are they watching it for? So if you dip in...
We'll come, sorry, maybe we finish that point after the break,
Absolutely,
Steve.
no problem.
Do forgive me for interrupting. We must stop there for a minute. Please come back after this quick break. Welcome back. I'm with Steve Ryder of North East Lincolnshire's Community Press Office and a director of Estuary TV, and Emma Lingard, who runs our newsroom, and we're talking about local television 1 year after the launch of this station. I interrupted you, Steve, sorry, before. You were talking about the sort of audience that we're getting.
Yeah, I think we looked quite long and hard at when people were going to watch Estuary. We schedule things like the news around when people are going to watch other programming across other stations. And yeah, the people I talk to, you know, I'm going to the gym this evening. Quite a lot of the people there know I'm involved, and I get quite a lot of feedback from there. Most people dip into Estuary for an hour or two in the evening, possibly during the daytime. Lots of them have never even noticed that there's the kind of repeat programming that you're talking about. I certainly don't see repeat. I'm aware that it's there, and I'm sure if I sat at home all day, every day watching television, I would probably notice it more. But that's not the kind of audience that we were going for. Programming, like advertising revenue, which you brought up again, Hugh, thank you for that, will increase over time, and that's part of the station growing.
So it's a sort of virtuous circle. The more audience you can get, the more the advertising is attractive, the more money you can ask for that.
Absolutely.
And that's how it grows. You talked about some of the feedback you get from members of the public, just meeting people. None of us have an opportunity to have a very scientific survey of the audience, but we have anecdotal experience of people coming up and talking to us. What do you hear, Emma?
I do hear positive, I have to say. You know, people come up, they like what we do, especially when I'm out and about. It's like, oh, the rambles, absolutely love the rambles. You know, when you're going to do some more of it. And they're buzzing because they're learning things about the county that they live in and have lived in probably all their lives, but they've never explored it. So I'm obviously in my programmes exploring the history of places. And they're really buzzed up by it, that they actually want to go to those places then and experience it for themselves. So you get feedback like that, which is very good. I know you say about scientific research. We have had some surveys done where people have come back to us. And I think with that sport, people absolutely love the fact that we are covering local sport in depth. And they love the wrestling that has come back.
The wrestling is popular, yes.
Yeah, very popular.
Well, the feedback I get is usually in pubs, and people say a few politely kind things, and then they sometimes use some very rude words, and then they always say, "But we love Lingard's Rambles," which is great.
Well,
It's
there
wonderful
you
for
go,
the
yeah,
station.
exactly.
What's-
Says it all.
What's our relationship with other local media? Because there are a couple of local radio stations here which have a smaller, in North East Lincolnshire, never mind the whole of our broadcast area, have a much smaller demographic. And there's your own operation, the Community Press Office, Steve. What's our relationship with other media organisations in the area?
Well, I suppose if you're talking about are we in bed with these people sharing content, no, we're not. I mean, from a news perspective, you know, yeah, we see these people at events and you're all very nice and pleasant. And obviously people like Michelle Lawless, Steve, they come on the news to review the papers.
And much appreciated it is.
You know, so, you know, it's not like a stab in people's backs. We all work together, but there's no formal partnerships or collaborations.
I think that's quite right, actually. I think that I don't think the public would want us all to be sort of covering the same stories in the same way. We're not a sort of a group that's going to report the media. We're not like a newspaper group where you've got local stations all over the country.
We're complementary rather than competitive.
Absolutely.
The idea of local television gained wide support almost as soon as the technology was available within the industry, as this film shows, and I should warn you, it contains some flash media executives.
The foundation of Calendar and Yorkshire Television, which I was involved in from 1968 when it went on air, was one of the most exciting events in my life. There's nothing more exciting and more challenging than welding a new team together to provide a new service and a new station for a new audience. It's one of the most exciting challenges you could possibly undergo and serve in. And that's what I hope will be happening in Grimsby beginning today. It's a great triumph to see at last that local television has come of age and come on air. It's exciting, partly because it's always interesting and exciting, stimulating to bring a new team together to form a new station and to do something new. That's one of the most exciting things you can do. But secondly, because it's local, I mean, I think this country is far too centralised on London. All our news comes from London, the BBC's run from London, the newspapers pour out of London. But in fact, life is local. Politics are local, shopping is local, and sport local. So we need local television to complement and supplement the national television we've got. And that's going to be very exciting too. Regional television we've already got. Now we've got it local, and the community can talk to itself, can say what it wants from its politicians, can communicate with its politicians. The advertisers, the local businesses can advertise their products to their audience. We can cover local entertainment, local groups. There's a lot of vibrant music, exciting things like that round Britain. Well, it can now go on local television, and the same's true of local sport. So, you know, life is local. Let's now live it local on television.
Well, there we are. Lots of other people having the idea of having local stations in other parts of the country. We're a year old. We're the first to have been launched. But there was planned by now to be about another 19 or 20. Not all of them have been a success. What went wrong, for instance, in Birmingham?
As far as I know with Birmingham, I mean, I in the early days when the bid was being put together, I had accompanied Leah to a number of the local TV meetings.
This is Leah Nietzsche, our station
Yes,
manager.
yeah. Now, I know with Birmingham, as far as, you know, being these meetings, they never actually had any premises. They had this idea they were going to do local TV, but they didn't have an office, didn't have a studio, they didn't even own camera equipment, which we had in place, which helped us secure the bid because the infrastructure was there. And I know the person that runs that, I think had worked for Canadian local TV and had obviously had these big ideas. And I think it was the investment and the infrastructure wasn't there for them to get off the ground in the first place, to be honest.
I think one of the words we should be looking at is competition as well. If you look at places like Birmingham and London, these are cities that have got very well established press and media outlets. If you look at the successes, we talk about ourselves, what's going on in Norwich, these are places that are relatively secluded in many ways. That, you know, Norfolk is a difficult place to get to. It's a difficult place to drive into and drive out of. Grimsby and parts of our reach, going all the way up the East Coast. Again, these are places where we're not competing against other massive media industries. So I think in a way, you know, our success, Emma's absolutely right, you know, the infrastructure that was here, the studio that we're sitting in right now was already in place before we started. And I think Norwich have been successful because of where they sit. It's a successful station, but I think the geographic location's key.
And perhaps they've been a little bit clever about their advertising selling policy as well.
I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, this national ad agency that I mentioned earlier, most of the local TV stations have signed up for it. Some of the obviously done it from the very beginning. We didn't. Now, for what reasons, I cannot answer that. I don't know why we didn't sign up in those early days, but we have now. So, you know, this is what you see those changes happening.
You mentioned the audience, and of course, or the seclusion of the audience, or the fact that we have very well-defined communities that we can address. And of course, that helps us so much because we know exactly who we're talking to. The station in London that was set up doesn't have that advantage at all. And yet it's backed with tremendous money from a Russian oligarch.
Yeah.
They could afford to do a very scientific audience survey. They found one program that had 0 audience. Not even the poor producer's mother was watching. But they were going for a specific demographic. They were going for the youth audience. Is that a fatal mistake for people like us for local television?
Yeah, you can't define it's so niche. I mean, our audience, we know, yeah, we've got a younger viewer, but they're pretty much middle-aged to the retired people watching. But I think on that note about audience and scientific research, again, it's Barb that does all the audience figures. And they've already said to us, we're not in a big enough area to be able to get those figures, because within Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire, they may only have 10 households with a Barb set box to pull the figures in. Whereas normally Barb are doing it on a national scale. So local TV is a very difficult thing to measure, to be quite honest. And you're not going to get, and I know advertisers want those
Absolutely,
numbers,
they do.
but it's difficult to measure because the organisation that does it for the country cannot do it at such a small level.
I think there's a massive danger in saying to people, this is for you, this isn't for you. If you're going to tell people what they can and can't do, especially young people, I think that's an absolutely fatal error.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that one of our advantages is that we had so much infrastructure here. We had this studio, these cameras, a control room here, because we're based at the Grimsby Institute. Could we exist without Grimsby Institute?
Good question. Before the Institute came aboard, of course, Estuary was Channel 7,
Yes.
and it was a standalone company. I mean, I was there from the very beginning with Channel 7, and we weren't owned. So yeah, it could stand alone. I mean, you know, I always joke that we need some of these oligarchs up here to help, because television's a greedy beast. You know, it wants money thrown at it. You know, equipment, staffing.
Yeah.
You know, making programmes. I think some people, well, I do wonder, they sit out there and think, oh yeah, you just, you know, throw it all together. It takes time and money, and, you know, we could do with some of that sometimes.
Steve, very, very quickly, are you confident about the future? 20 seconds.
Very confident. I think we've got through the first year. It's been successful. Obviously, we need more revenue. We've all alluded to that. I think the future's bright. But I think we do now need to start making sure that, as you've said so many times, that we are commercially viable.
Excellent. Emma, Steve, thank you both very much. Hope to
you.
see you again this time next year. That's all we have time for, I regret, this time. I hope you'll join me again next week for another hot topic. Until then, goodbye.